I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
And I'm Eric Alexander with Benchmark Income Group.
Welcome to the Big Wealth Podcast. I have to say, I am very excited about our guest today because our guest is one of my favorite people. We have Leigh Bennett, who is a Medicare Advisory Manager and has been doing that for 10 plus years. But I have to say why she's one of my favorites first, because we actually live in the same neighborhood and we met at a networking event, I think, of some sort.
Exactly.
And when I told her that I was trying to move into her neighborhood, she drove around the neighborhood and took pictures of the houses that were coming soon on the market. And so the fact that she took that extra time to do something that was meaningful for me when we had just met each other, I think is the perfect story to describe who Leigh is as a human, because she really has always gone kind of that extra mile and really takes care of people. And so I could not be more delighted to share a human being with our audience than I am right now. So Leigh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mary. So glad to be here. Appreciate it.
So we're gonna, I think, talk about Medicare, right?
Yeah,
I mean, everyone's
exactly.
favorite topic, right?
Yes, so exciting.
So what would you say are some of the biggest questions that you get about Medicare?
First and foremost, the biggest question I get is, am I required to enroll in Medicare when I turn 65, which is your Medicare eligibility date? And that really depends on your current coverage situation. So it could go either way. If you are retired and you have no other credible coverage available to you and you are about to turn 65, then yes, I highly encourage someone to enroll in Medicare A and B during their initial enrollment period for Medicare, and then add on a solution that fits their needs best. However, if you are 65, still work for a company that has more than 20 full-time employees, enrollment in Medicare is not necessary at the time you're turning 65. You can actually wait until you're ready to retire and would then lose your employer coverage. So I think there's a misnomer out there that people feel they are required to enroll regardless of their situation. So it is situational. In some ways, yes, you may have to enroll in Medicare, but in some situations, you are not required to.
And so what would happen if somebody was double enrolled? So if they're enrolled with the healthcare that's provided by their company and they enroll in Medicare?
So a couple things. It's not the worst thing in the world. However, you'll probably be spending money you don't need to be spending. If you are still employed and enroll in both parts of original Medicare A and B, Part B does have a monthly premium. And if you work for a company with more than 20 full-time employees, your Medicare coverage is secondary to your employer coverage. So you're probably paying some type of premium to have your employer coverage. And then you'd be paying this Part B premium as well. And it would just be that extra layer of physician services coverage that would most likely never get utilized. So you'd be double covered, as well as be paying more than what you need to be paying.
Right.
That's something as an advisor, if we have older clients that are working, we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, no
Everybody
doubt.
likes found money.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want anyone out there spending money they don't need to be spending at that particular time.
Yeah, I just thought once you hit 65, baby, you get the thing in the mail and you got to get going.
Yeah, no. And that's the other thing, a little misnomer. People think it's automatic. The only way Medicare will be automatic as far as enrollment is if you are taking Social Security benefits prior to age 65, you are automatically enrolled in both parts A and B of original Medicare on the first of the month of your 65th birthday month. But if you don't need that Part B because you're employed and your employer has more than 20 full-time employees, you get the opportunity to defer Part B at that time and maintain just Part A.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just save people lots of money.
That's right.
I mean, I think everybody's starting to work
My
longer. I mean,
job,
that's
we're
what
good.
that's what we're seeing, right? I don't think is as much about money. It's about what else am I going to do with my day? I like what I do. And so I think we see more and more people sort of extending that out a little bit.
So many of my clients, I would actually say the majority of my clients, when they are enrolling in Medicare and working with me on their Medicare solutions, they're 70 plus years old. I would say my average age client is probably closer to 75 than 65.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think just to Eric's point, people are continuing to work well past age 65. I mean,
Wow.
I know when Medicare was initially brought to, light, that was, many, many years ago. And that's when people really thought 65 was your retirement age. And that was it. I think most people feel at 65, they still have a good 10, 15 years left to continue working and don't want to stop. So
Yeah, being
I always say,
productive, right?
when I work with my clients, I say 65 is the new 45.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, do you, and I'm asking you a tea leaves question for which you probably have no insight. But now I'm just curious, we keep seeing Social Security being sort of inched back a little bit. Do you see them maybe doing that with Medicare? Saying, well, you can enroll to some other age.
If I had my crystal ball,
Yeah.
I would be able to answer that question. I don't think that they're going to push back that Medicare date. I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen anything or read anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly would make a little more sense, just based on, like you're saying, Eric, with Social Security, they're kind of playing around with that and
Right.
retirement age. But certainly it could happen.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Asking the dates to match up would be just absolutely too much.
Way and too easy.
Yes, that couldn't possibly make sense. So
it's a bridge too far, Mary. Just
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. So when should somebody start looking at Medicare coverage?
Okay. So once again, that will be situational. If someone is turning 65 and they have no other coverage and they are going to move to Medicare at that age, I typically say reach out to me between 2 to 3 months prior to your 65th birthday month. You will already be in your Medicare initial enrollment period, and that's the perfect time. If you're going to continue working and you decide at age 72 you want to retire, I recommend 3 months, possibly even 4 months before your retirement date to reach out, because there's a little more involved in getting enrolled in the Medicare piece with Social Security. It takes a little bit longer. So I like to have that extra pad. And then we look at the solutions and get that individual enrolled, tying up the date with their retirement date. So they will not have any loss of coverage.
What happens if I wait too long?
So a couple things could happen. There are some late enrollment penalties for Part B. So if you miss enrollment in Part B in your initial enrollment period, there is a general enrollment period that runs for a few months at the beginning of the year. But if you miss that, then you may perhaps have a late enrollment penalty for Part B. And if you're employed and you either maintain COBRA or don't have anything at all, you have an 8-month window to enroll in Part B before that Part B late enrollment penalty would apply. So it's a lot to think about, and every situation could be a little different, but there could be some penalty for waiting to enroll in Part B if you need it.
So get in early. And the thing that always struck me was, because I remember how to spell Medicare, and that's about all I remembered from years and years and years ago, having to take some of those tests. But I remember in the middle of some of those tests, and this is why it made me think of, like, you got to start 2 to 3 months, because I remember it in my head, it being hyper complex and donut holes and A's and B's and D's. And do I want drugs? I want drugs all the time, but do I want good drugs? Do I want, eyeglasses and dental? Like, it seemed complex, but I think in talking with you over the years, it seems like maybe it's not as complex as I remember it.
I think that, yes, it feels very overwhelming. When an individual is kind of getting close to their 65th birthday, they start getting inundated with mail, most of which is advertisements, but it almost makes that individual feel like they need to do something. They need to do it now, and it's too much, and it's all coming at once. And, what I really like to do is sort of take a step back, do it more high level, Medicare is not as complex as people make it out to seem. It's relatively simple if you break it down. Original Medicare is made up of Parts A and Part B. You get that through Social Security Administration. Part A is your hospital coverage. Part B is your physician services coverage. And basically that's going to cover 80% of your Medicare approved services. And so then the solutions come into place. How do you help cover that additional 20%? You do need that creditable drug coverage, the Part D. So it's really simple. At the end of the day, there are only two solution options an individual can add on to their A and B. The first solution option is a Medicare supplement or a Medigap plan, plus a standalone Part D prescription drug plan. That's it for that one solution. The other solution option would be a Medicare Advantage or Part C plan. That's it. Those are the two options. There are carrier options and plan options under each of those, but at the end of the day, when you boil it all down, it's just two different options, one or the other. And what
that seems so simple, Leigh. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have been at a continuing education event and they're talking about Medicare, and I leave more confused than I showed up. I mean, like, it's been consistent. And there are people that are like, oh, I do this for your clients. I make it easy. And I'm thinking, well, if you can't make it easy when you're teaching the continuing education class, how are you going to make it easy when you tell my client?
Right.
I hear that a lot. And what's, the best thing that I can hear from a client, and I do fortunately hear it often, is when a client and I are getting off the phone and they say, thank you, I totally get this now. And I do hear that a lot. So my goal is to make sure that anybody that I work with has a decent understanding of the coverage and the benefits. I think that's super important. I think that way they can be their own best advocate. They can manage their medical needs much better. So my goal is always, how can we make this understandable and in a way that you can see it and make it work for you?
Yeah. Well, and I think with so much, and you made a good point earlier, with so much data coming in and this big date all lining up, and it's 65 and all these things happen, man, it's got to feel a little bit pressure cookerish. Like I remember going from 17 to 18 and I'm like, oh my gosh, the volume of like new things that I've got to go deal with now that I'm 18, right? Or crazy. So yeah,
exactly.
That makes sense. And then are you seeing sort of shifts in the industry or things that are slowly drifting from where it started a few years ago?
The one big shift that I'm seeing is that Medicare Advantage plans or Part C plans are becoming much more robust and desirable. And there was a time when many people wouldn't even consider a Medicare Advantage plan, mostly because they hear through the grapevine they're not great plans. But what I'm seeing each and every year as I certify annually is these plans becoming richer and more, like I said, robust, offering benefits that you can't get with Medicare. So these benefits are dental coverage, and some of the dental coverage on these plans is as good as what I see in employer group plans. Vision coverage, hearing coverage, and this is the cool discounts on hearing aids. I mean, most people don't want to get hearing aids because they're so expensive. So these plans are offering that. They're offering over-the-counter allowances for various products that you can get through their catalog or going to certain pharmacies. That some of these carriers offer meals delivered after you've been in the hospital for a few days. So lots of different benefits that you don't get. And that's what I like about these Medicare Advantage plans. Listen, they may not be right for every single person, but when it is a good fit, they are wonderful plans.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting because what you said was they heard through the grapevine, right? Or, they heard somewhere that they shouldn't do this. And I think it's so easy to take a snapshot in time and then just assume that nothing is changing and it's moving into the future, and that, this person who had this experience 5 years ago or 10 years ago says, no, you shouldn't do that, because at the time they were making the decision, maybe it really didn't make sense, but things evolve and change. And so I think it's incredibly important not to just say, well, my neighbor said I shouldn't do that, so I'm not going to. I actually need to go and consult an expert and look at what are the facts. And we spend a fair amount of time talking about that, because I think there's a lot of preconceived notions about finance in general, any type of insurance. And I think that there's this tendency to crowdsource your decision making. And for something as important as this, I don't think you can abdicate the responsibility for doing the research with an expert and making the decision.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I really encourage my clients to allow me to look at both solution options for them. Even if they make a mention of, well, I'm not really into the Advantage plan, or I'm not really into the supplement plans, I still want them to look at the whole picture. That way they can make the best decision that works for them. So I agree with you, Mary, on that point. Exactly. You can't necessarily take the information you get from somebody else that may not be an expert, because maybe that information was a little dated or old or biased.
Or maybe their situation is just different than yours. There's a reason it might not make sense for them, but your situation might be totally different and it does make sense for you.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's been added features and they just didn't know that the feature was there anymore. Like they've not kept up with the changes in their own plan.
Exactly.
Well, I like the mail delivery. That sounds lovely. How do I get that to attach to my health insurance?
I'm telling you what. And I just want people dropping off free meals to, well, it's not free, but dropping off meals to my house for no apparent reason.
It's really nice. I mean, the clients that are on those plans, they love them. They love all the little perks and extras. But then again, if that plan isn't a good fit, the Medicare supplement with the standalone drug plan can also be a good option. And it's not going to be a one size fits all, is what I like to say.
Right. For sure. And then one of the things that I've heard recently through the grapevine, so I'm coming to the source here, is that the number of doctors sort of taking Medicare patients, or the number of doctors in the system, whatever the system is shrinking. I
like that you put air quotes around that, the system.
The system.
For the audio podcast version, the system.
Yes, there were air quotes. Yes.
Yeah, there were air quotes, right? So what is that a thing? Is there a shrinking pool, or is that a misnomer?
So I would say it's somewhat of a misnomer, because in my research, I find that most doctors take Medicare. And there's a caveat to that. There are some that don't. And I would tell you, I find that more in the concierge services. They tend to not take any insurance. Right. Medicare or regular insurance. So that's a different kind of situations. What I do find more often is that doctors won't take new Medicare patients. So that's a bigger challenge than finding a doctor that takes Medicare. I would tell you that's the biggest thing, is the ones that don't take new Medicare patients. Yeah. And I find that more with primary care physicians, because they tend to have a larger patient pool and maybe can't handle, extra additional patients. But other than that, I really would tell you that most doctors take Medicare.
They just aren't looking necessarily for new clients that are paying with Medicare.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, you've got to have some, if you're trying to shrink the number of bodies that you're seeing every day, you need some criteria, right?
I imagine so, yeah.
Yeah. So
is there a huge difference in the reimbursement from Medicare than from like a private pay?
So all medical rates are set at the Medicare rate, even for you and I not on Medicare. And doctors, all providers, I should say, have the ability to charge in excess up to 15% more than the Medicare rate. I would probably assume most doctors charge more than the Medicare rate.
Yeah.
That makes sense then, why they might not want to take a new client.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it still seems like it's not a shrinking pool necessarily. It just might be for the new person that hasn't been to that doctor before.
But to be honest, I feel like every time I'm looking for a new doctor, they're not taking new patients. So
it happens not Medicare as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
What I would say to most of my clients, and this is continuing year to year to year, as the number of people that turn 65 every single day is approximately 10,000 people. It
Wow.
would probably hurt physicians and other providers to not take Medicare because I would say that the majority of our population is age 65 or higher, and people are living longer.
Yeah.
So if somebody, oh, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
And we had that conversation earlier today, and I can't remember the number, and I probably should know it, but like there's a coming, we've all been talking about sort of the number of boomers that are turning 65 is, 10,000 a day, and that number keeps getting bigger. But if I remember right from this morning's conversation we had earlier, there was a culminating point, and I think it's 2030, 2035, somewhere in that
Probably,
range, where like the highest volume, or that sweet spot of that big wave of coming into 65 is coming soon.
I'm a little before that 10 years from now, but yes, that's probably, I would assume, about right. I mean, I haven't seen any new data, but the data still supports that about 10,000 people turn 65 every day. Not all are going to go to Medicare, but that's quite a bit of people in the United States.
Yeah, all making that transition.
Exactly.
So I have a question, because I think we have some listeners who are older, and then we have some listeners that are much younger. If somebody has a parent who's getting ready to retire, is there anything that their kids can do to help with this process? So if they have adult children that are saying, oh, mom and dad are getting ready to retire, I want to make sure they do this right.
Sure.
What should they know?
I think the most important thing is if their parents are in the process of transitioning to Medicare, that they know that they have someone that they can trust that can advise them on selecting their Medicare solutions and helping them just with the general enrollment of Medicare. So just ensuring that they have an individual they trust.
Right.
I think doing it on your own, it can be done. I think it's a lot harder and a lot more confusing. So just finding someone like myself that can really provide that guidance and a little bit of a hand-holding, if you will.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in cost if someone tries to do it themselves or if they go through someone like you?
Nope.
Not at all.
Be identical across the board, whether you go direct to a carrier or you work with an advisor.
So there's no reason not to talk to somebody.
Correct.
Yeah.
And is
I
there
learned something new today as well.
There you
So
go.
amazing.
So are there differences? So this, I think, is just transparency, right? I would love to understand, are there reasons that an agent might push somebody one way or another, either compensation or bonus packages or anything like that?
So the carriers do pay advisors to once business is placed with them. I work under the assumption I don't want to know what the compensation is, because I am not going to cherry pick carriers to make more money. I want the client to choose the carrier that fits them best, that they're most comfortable with. I only work with A-rated carriers, so my pool is slightly smaller than most.
So those are the carriers that actually pay the claims when they're supposed to. And
I would imagine so.
Right.
One of the many pieces behind that A rating for sure. But I leave it up to the client to select the carrier. With the drug plan and the Medicare Advantage plan, I kind of help hold their hand a little bit more, because there's a little more that goes into selecting those plans, medications, pharmacy, doctors, etc. So I'm going to only recommend a specific plan, because their doctors accept it. Their medications look good with it.
You're going really in depth. You're saying if these are the doctors that you're seeing, we know they'll take this. Not just saying some doctors do, some don't. You're really taking that extra step with them to be sure that what they're getting is actually usable.
Exactly. So there is a lot of research that goes into the drug plan and advantage plan recommendations. So I am a little more specific with those, but with regard to Medicare supplements, coverage is identical. You could go to a C-rated carrier and get the exact same coverage. I just only work with A-rated carriers. And so I really work very closely with the client to help determine who the carrier they want is. And I sometimes change recommendations based on maybe a feeling about a certain carrier.
Yeah. And then I have one last question. It's just now I'm just into the logistics and the weeds, and I'm like, but what about
Shocker.
So shocking. Yes. So from the time the client walks in and says, hey, I'm turning 72 tomorrow. I'm thinking about getting coverage. How many meetings? What's that process look like in like 30 seconds or less? Like, what is that? Man, we're signing up for 7 meetings with you guys, and it's going to take a little bit, or is it like, hey, in 30 minutes we get you signed up and you're ready to go?
It's a relatively simple process. It does not take a lot of meetings. I guess the hardest part, and I would say that with air quotes, is getting enrolled in original Medicare A or B. If you don't have B, just B. That has to go through Social Security Administration. And so that part takes a little longer.
Okay.
And that's a little bit more work on the client because they have some forms, et cetera.
Sure.
With regard to working with me, I can turn it around in not even 24 hours. I mean, I can do it really quickly. We just need to have that Part B, both Part A and Part B in place in order to enroll in the solutions. So sometimes we're waiting on that Part B confirmation. That's usually what takes the longest. But I would tell you, I typically have, on average, max 2 phone calls with my clients and probably 5 to 6 emails back and forth.
Oh, nice. So it's relatively painless. It's not some sort of drawn out deal.
It's not like meeting with us, Eric, where we want you to,
Yeah,
spend your whole life with us while we're educating you. This is like, she gets it done.
It's 7 1-hour meetings, so buckle up.
I try my hardest to make it simple, easy, and as quick as they want it to be. Now, there are clients I spend more time with because they need that, and that's okay. But I would say my averages are, what I just said.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's great. So if people have questions and they want to call you and ask you these questions or reach out to you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Absolutely. So they can absolutely call me. I have a toll-free number. It's 877-991-3656. Had to make sure I got those numbers right. So 877-991-3656. And that calls my computer. And if I can't answer, it just means I'm probably on another call. But that's a great way to reach out to me. You can also reach out to me via my email. I get lots of emails every day. That's the nice thing about electronics is that we have that ability to communicate super simple, real email. And my email address is pretty simple. It's Leigh, Leigh Bennett, Bennett at I, M as in Mary, A as in Apple, corp.com.
Easy. That's great. Bye. Leigh Bennett, you're the best.
Thank
you so much for all of this. It was very enlightening. And I think Eric and I both learned something new today, which is always a plus. And I know if we're learning, so is our audience. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Leigh.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Eric, where can they find you?
I'm at Economics with Eric, wherever you use social media.
And if you're looking for me, you can find me at The Wealth Woman or at wealthwoman.com. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.